So welcome everybody to tonight's GCSP Innovation Night. My name is Ashley Mueller and I work with the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and I will be your host and MC for this evening. So for the next 60 minutes, we will lead you through the new and improved GCSP Innovation Night, brought to you by GCSP's Creativity and Innovation Initiative, part of the Geopolitics and Global Futures program, part of the GCSP. It is led by Professor Naif El-Rodan, who unfortunately could not be with us this evening, but I know he is tuning in live online, so we are also streaming across the world tonight. I will shortly invite the director of the Geneva Center for Security Policy, Ambassador Christian Doucet, followed by a keynote speech from Mr. Nicholas Nikli, Deputy Secretary General, Department of Security for the State of Geneva. He will be giving our keynote speech this evening. This evening, we also have the chance to sit down with Ms. Maria Butler, Director of Global Programs at the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom, to hear about her creativity and innovation journey. And of course, the main reason we are here this evening is to reveal to you, for the first time ever, the 2018 winners of the Prize for Innovation in Global Security. So do stay tuned for that, because they have just won 10,000 Swiss francs. We want to hear about that. So without further ado, I will now invite Ambassador Christian Doucet, Director of the Geneva Center for Security Policy, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Good evening. Bonsoir. Welcome to the Maison de la Paix. We all live here in the peaceful Geneva. We are also joined by a global audience via GCSP YouTube channel. And whether we live here or abroad, we live in a highly interconnected world. It is marked by far-reaching and amazing transformation. And these transformations, they affect all of us, here and globally. And dealing with these challenges requires innovative and imaginative problem-solving skills, mindset, and toolset. And don't fight the problem, shape the solution. This is one of the principles of the work here at GCSP. And this is why, for the first year in a row, we are happy, under the leadership of Professor El-Rodan, to have this innovative night and to have this global prize on innovation, because we want to recognize individuals or organizations who have made a contribution to address the amazing and difficult and challenging international issues we have all to face. So I wish you a very nice evening. I wish you fruitful discussions, fruitful questions also, and let us later discover who is the winner of this year's prize. Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Doucet. So I would now like to welcome to the stage tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Nicholas Nikli, Deputy Secretary General at the Department for Security at the State of Geneva. Welcome, Mr. Nikli.
Good evening, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Ashley, for the intro, and thanks, Christian, for inviting me to speak here tonight. It's a great pleasure and honor. Christian, when you announced this event on the internet, you promised a deep dive. I think I quote you here. And the GCSP, you promised a deep dive into the impact that innovation can have to create a safer world. This is a fascinating topic which would possibly occupy us several hours, weeks, or perhaps even months and years. I have to be really humble here. I definitely can't promise a deep dive in just 15 minutes. Allow me, therefore, to touch upon two relatively recent subject matters where Geneva can make significant contributions to a safer world: cyber governance and sustainable finance. Dear friends, we are living transformational times. We are living in the era of the exponential. This is my first point. Exponential development in computing power, exponential development of capacities to connect digitally have very profound effects on the way we do all function, whether at work or at home, if that distinction isn't already outdated. With AI, our own inventiveness and increasingly the machine's inventiveness, think here Move 37 and its consequences, this inventiveness has the potential to create entirely new paradigms. This is quite simply a period unlike any other in history of civilization, as developments do happen at a pace and scale not known before. Digital tools and AI are presenting us with new pathways of opportunity to create deeply empowering prospects and accelerate the transition towards a more and more sustainable future, including fast-tracking the implementation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. But this profound transformation also creates significant challenges to tackle, which we certainly can't underestimate. The expanding cyber warfare and cybercrime phenomenon does very clearly make the world a more divided and less safe place. Most unfortunately, humanity's most significant footprint, size XXL, on planet Earth, completes the picture of those exponential forces at play. Science has documented biodiversity loss, global warming, and catastrophic impact of pollution all too well. August 1st, which is the Swiss National Day, happens also to be the day we humans have used all of the resources for the year, should we want to use them at a sustainable rate. The creature that wins against the environment loses everything at the end of the day. And we are far from moving in the right direction if we want to limit global warming to a manageable 2 degrees. By 2038, 38% of the world's population are predicted to have no proper access to water anymore. Hundreds of millions of people will most likely be classified as climate refugees, and these are nightmares from a humanitarian and peace-building perspective. Fortunately, while these are certainly formidable challenges to tackle, both on the digital and the sustainability front, those trials and tribulations do also represent gigantic opportunities for the world, if we indeed are capable of acting decisively and innovatively. And this brings me to my point. Why is Geneva the ideal place to push the boundaries of creativity for the greater good? This city has a great track record when it comes to serving as a platform of negotiation, facilitation, and arbitration for highly sensitive issues. Here, many more important chapters of global cooperation were written. We have proven capable on this small territory with global outreach to welcome all of the parties to the table and to offer innovative solutions for some of the most complex challenges. Director General Michael Müller, who makes us the pleasure and honor to be with us tonight, has quite possibly summed this up most eloquently when he said that everything that is done here in Geneva has a direct impact on every person on the planet in any 24-hour period. This is brilliant, and the problem is it's possibly not good anymore not good anymore given the scale of the mountain we need to climb. And perhaps, Michael, you can answer or disagree with me. As Mahatma Gandhi once stated, if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself. In other terms, we do need to lead the way to innovate even better, to be ever more creative, and shall I say, to be bolder if we want to make the planet a better place. In a world where increasingly no stakeholder alone is capable of finding the right answer or implementation capacity, we do collectively need to invent transformative courses of action to give ourselves a chance. When it comes to the digital governance challenge, the first of two concrete examples I want to highlight tonight. Geneva already plays a very significant role. Over half of the governance of the digital sphere is dealt with, is tackled here in Geneva, whether it's on the trade, humanitarian, IP, or normative front, to name just a few. So this strong geographic concentration of world-class expertise gives us a very good starting point, very good indeed, but in my opinion, we can still do much better. To move forward and to offer improved responses, we must be more than multi-stakeholder. We must also be multidisciplinary. These are not my words, these are the words of Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He called for this 3 weeks ago at the IGF in Paris. As the Secretary General noted, cooperation amongst actors in the digital space has not kept pace with new technologies. Digital technologies are transversal, yet discussions are still siloed. This needs to change, and Geneva has very much been part of that change. From the UN high-level panel, the Digital Cooperation Panel of the UN Secretary General, whose secretariat is partly based in Geneva, to the World Economic Forum Global Cybersecurity Center, from a world-class academic hub to top-notch business engagement and vibrant civil society, there is a rich ecosystem here which connects digital issues across interdisciplinary areas. But to start breaking the walls between stakeholders and disciplines, together with the Geneva Internet Platform, the Swiss national authorities, we launched last year, about 14 months ago, the Geneva Digital Talks to explore alternative approaches to digital governance. More recently, the Swiss Confederation has launched a most promising Geneva Dialogue on Responsible Behavior in Cyberspace, also focusing on multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approaches. As the result of the Geneva Digital Talks, we have presented the Geneva Initiative on Digital Policy Capacity Development at last year's IGF here in Geneva, focusing notably on the fundamental importance of education, resilience, and inclusiveness in the digital governance challenge. And this last point, inclusiveness, is in my opinion crucial. While we talk about AI, robotics, blockchain, and other tech innovations, a very significant digital divide still exists between and within jurisdictions. Inequality gaps manifest themselves in terms of income, wealth, health, gender, and geography. And in an interconnected world, this can lead to tensions and hostile behaviors. It therefore needs to be urgently and more innovatively addressed. So far, the feedbacks we received to these initiatives have been very, very well received. And I feel that's good, but here again, we need to get even further when we consider the next steps. If we want to truly break new ground and to make the world a more safe place, philosophers, specialists of ethics, Biologists, anthropologists, development experts, just to name a few, need to be included into the debate. We can't just, in other terms, focus on the diplomatic, on the legal, and on the technical terms of this question. Equally, we must not just focus on prevention of cyber attack threats. Concentrating on resilience building and a mechanism is of paramount importance. It's not the number of times one falls down which counts. It's the number of times and the way one rises again, which is the key. When it comes to the urgency to accelerate the alteration of business models and to implement SDGs, the second subject matter I wanted to highlight tonight, Geneva is also doing its best to lead the way and to transform the crisis into an opportunity. And what an opportunity. The Business and Sustainable Development Commission has estimated recently that the investment and market opportunity around sustainability is worth about US $12 trillion up to 2030. Companies, quite simply, must absolutely increase their positive social impact as an integral part of their core business strategies. More and more investors, but also consumers and regulators, and it's that common front which is so key, more and more of those are insisting on the respect of the UN Global Compact principles and the ESG criteria, environment, social and governance standards. Sustainable finance is growing very substantially, and just very recently, we were lucky here in Geneva to convince the newly established FC4S Secretariat, Financial Centers for Sustainability. This is the global network of financial centers pushing the sustainability agenda to establish its secretariat here in Geneva. Through the sharing of best practices, innovative thinking, research and pooling of brain power, financial centers, which do traditionally compete against each other, do also learn how to cooperate and to create leverage together. This co-petition, as we call it, has to become a key feature of this new world if we want it to be a more safe and inclusive place. We have also recently launched with the UN SDG Lab and Sustainable Finance Geneva, amongst others, a first attempt to create a new bridge in Geneva. And I'm perfectly aware that whenever we speak about bridges here in Geneva, it's a bit of a politically loaded question, but this one shouldn't be too much of a risk. This bridge is indeed connecting the financial center and the global governance representatives to, again, just push the boundaries, invent new things. It's still early days, but here as well, the first signs are very encouraging. Is a company the best in the world, or is it also the best for the world? This question will be asked with more and more insistence. And because the 21st century is about exploring new partnerships, we are doing our best to function as an international innovation campus by mapping the ecosystem and by connecting the dots. In Geneva, we do not want to choose between economic growth and sustainability. We strive for success, but we also embrace values. Geneva is not aiming at serving the few, but the many. We want to become the Silicon Valley of sustainability. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me conclude. I've already taken too much of your precious time. The message is the following. We do have a window of opportunity ahead of us. Both on digital governance and sustainability, things could get out of control in less than a decade. There is, in other terms, no time to lose. We need to act decisively to ensure technology does empower us and not overpower us, to again paraphrase Secretary General Gutierrez. The same must be done with our relationship to our ecosystem, financial empowerment of the many, and transformation of our business models. Geneva is quite simply the place where tech meets humanity. It's the place where tech meets life. This has been the case since the foundation of the Red Cross, and it's more crucial than ever before that we build on that proud heritage. Humanity is at the crossroads, and whether this will be our finest century ever or a disastrous one depends on the action we will take in the coming years. We share an enormous collective responsibility to take the positive avenue, and it's a race, but not a competition. In other terms, we have to cross the finishing line all together. Together, we must succeed. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Ms. Maria Butler, Director of Global Programs for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Thank you. Welcome, Maria. Thank you for being with us here this evening. Now, you are a lawyer. You are a human rights advocate. You are an app developer. But most importantly, you are now the Director of Global Programs for WILF.
Most importantly, I'm a
Most
mom.
important. Oh, right, okay.
But yes, I am also the Director of Global Programs.
Even better, perfect. So based on these points, you clearly have had to pull your creativity strings throughout your, well, personal and professional life. Now tonight's theme is innovation, and we are all here to learn about innovation, but you have a slightly different angle. Could you please just start with what are you doing now? What are you currently involved with?
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for being here. I'm really happy to be here as a young woman activist working every day on peace and security. And I really picked up a few themes. I try and carry them through from Nicholas. Some of the points I wrote very big were inclusivity, fairness and justice, and how we do that. And at the core of our work in WILF every day, we're trying to bring those new ideas to peace and security. So how can we make peace and security more inclusive, but also more fair? So the passing of the Sustaining Peace Agenda really touched on the core of what WILF has been doing for 103 years. How can we, as a community, address the root causes of conflict? And when women mobilized in 1915, it was a radical idea. They were part of the suffragettes movement at the time, but they said not only do we want the vote, we also want peace in the world. So 1,300 of them organized without email in a few weeks to get to The Hague and strategize about how to end World War I. And now currently, that's what I have the privilege of working with every day, women who are doing that, women in Korea. We're about to launch a campaign next year, a women-led campaign to end the Korean War, leading up from a march that happened across the DMZ in 2015. We also get to knock on a lot of doors at the United Nations. Here in Geneva next week, for example, there'll be initial roundtable talks on Western Sahara. And one of our members called us 2 weeks ago only and said, can independent women be included? That we have all the resolutions, we have all the commitments, but actually when the spaces are happening, how does that translate? So we've been knocking on doors the last few days, trying to ask the questions about implementation of agreed commitments. Will independent women civil society, will women activists have a place in the initial talks? So this is a sample of the type of work. I also get to wear other hats in the organization and think about organizational issues for our team.
Yes, and actually your organization has 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners in its history, at least, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So they've clearly had to be innovative in their work that they've done. And there's quite a large inheritance, I think, and heritage that shoes to fill, I would say. But I am interested in one quote, because the work that you guys do is quite vast. And on your LinkedIn profile, I noticed a quote from the founder of your organization, Jane Addams, who is also a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Social advance depends as much upon the process through which it is secured as upon the result itself. How do you think this applies to innovation?
I do love that quote, and she was a wise woman. And it continues, I think, to challenge us. How not only do we think about the end result, and particularly in innovation, a lot of people focus on the product. How are we going to create a new thing? How are donors going to fund a new website, a new app, and so on? And often we forget to think about the transformation in the process. And I think what Wilf always does, and indeed through feminism, I've come to really understand the process is so critical. Who's included, who's excluded? Who really has the power? And I think for me, a lot of the work we also do is looking at power dynamics, whether it's in conflict situations or in policy making. And certainly this quote speaks to me about not only it's what we do, it's how we do it. And I think in leadership, in innovation, this really touches on the core of sustainability, because it's how we do things leaves such an impact in the world.
Yes, and it's nice to get here. We've heard tonight already about Geneva being an innovative hub, merging tech and humanity, tech and life. Very interesting quote that I will surely take away from this evening. Now, WILF is clearly a global organization, and it's got national associations in every continent. How are you guys being innovative in the work that you're doing globally? I know you've mentioned Korea already. There's a initiative on Syria. In Cameroon, you've done some things. How are you guys working with the local teams to be innovative in what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it goes to also where we are in the peace and security area. Local initiatives, context is so important. And indeed, the same for activists. It's so critical that we understand the expertise, that we respect the expertise, and that we value the expertise of those living and working in conflict situations. And for us, that's the number one principle in what we do. It's not imposing or upscaling or copying and pasting initiatives. It's really about engaging with reality, whether it's in Ukraine or Bosnia, where we're doing a lot of work with feminist political economy. So how do we analyze the peace process, the Dayton Peace Accords, what impact they left on society, what type of peace was left in society 20 years later, and indeed the economic reforms, who did they include? Who did they speak to? And we've been pushing forward the agenda to look at the accountability of all actors, both the national governments, but also the international financial institutes. When they're working in post-conflict situations, it's so critical that we understand the political economy of conflict and of gender, because often what happens is gender blind and conflict blind. So bringing those together in, I think, looking at the silos, it's really about breaking those down. So in other examples are quite amazing. Just recently in Cameroon, there was elections, presidential elections, the parliamentary elections, a municipality have been postponed. But what women did there was to organize and set up a situation room. They've happened in other places in Africa also, where they have a call center, a free number where people call if they see irregularities, they see fraud, they see violence. And it's really a conflict prevention tool in real time. And it's also about early warning. So it's putting in place women's leadership, women's visibility at the national level, but also the independence of civil society. And we all know, and we've talked about many places, the shrinking space for civil society around the world. And it's so critical that not only do we value it, as I said, but also that we resource it.
Thank you. Extremely interesting. And I know that also before WILF and before some of your other jobs, you even started your own organization when you were in university. Can you tell us about that and what sparked that?
Yes, sure. It's been a while since I talked about it, but it's close to my heart. It was called GRA, which in Irish means love. And what I think, just to pick up on the theme of innovation, I could talk about its own story, as love always is. But it was about, I was working in a rural community in Kenya, and there was a problem we saw working with other activists around education. And when I went home, it was the boom, the Celtic Tiger years. Young people were disconnected, I would say, from the realities around the world. So we worked to bring young people in Ireland to mobilise and to engage in, we called it Party with a Purpose. So it was to really engage peers in, and not to leave philanthropy or engagement for a certain elite. It was to bring that down to the basis so we could all understand giving and solidarity. But on the other side, we got to work with a great team. We sent many kids to secondary school. We fed thousands of children lunch every day, a simple bowl of rice and beans. We built many community initiatives, and it was all voluntary, so 100% of the funds went to the communities. And what was important, I think, for my reflection on it, on the initiative, was how important innovation is with the people around you. So innovation never just really is one person. It always comes through the process again that Jane talked about. Who is there, who is placed, how you build the ideas together. And in Kenya, I couldn't have done it without Diana, who leads a community-based organisation on the ground, a great friend, and who we were working like sisters to make it happen. So that's a short story.
You actually, you not only started your own organization, but then you developed your own app. And I just want to touch on that because it's the topic of innovation here tonight, but that you have developed this app. Can you please tell the audience what the app is, who is it for, and who is using it?
So the app was when I had moved to Wilf. I was working in New York in our initiative called Peace Women. I was focused on the Security Council work on women, peace and security, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And we had took the analysis of 10 years of how the Security Council had integrated gender and 1325 into the geographic work of the council. So it was a big analysis, and also then looked at 13 themes, from security sector reform, human rights, humanitarian, and we did it into a handbook with the government of Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And then we had done the handbook, and we said, oh, but it's going to be on the shelf in the missions of the governments, and it was for the experts. So when they're negotiating texts of resolutions, mandate renewals, they could look and see where was the gendered language, what was the agreed language, how could we use it. So we came up with the idea, a guy called Sven, to turn it into an app. This is 2011, or 2010, 2011, and within a short time, with very little resources, we made the first app that was really related to the Security Council. After that, many more have been made, and I think I learned from it also you need to keep innovating. So soon afterwards, the US diplomat who was working on women, peace and security said, well, I have a BlackBerry, so I need it on BlackBerry. So then we had to make a BlackBerry. So now we're going into the 4th or 5th update. We've broadened it. We've broadened the audience to not only Security Council experts negotiating country or thematic resolutions, but slightly broader community working on women, peace and security.
So just one quick question here to any app developers in the room or tuning in online. Do you have a small piece of advice for them? You know, you saw a problem and you created a solution. And what would you encourage that person, you know, sitting behind their screen right now who wants to develop an app? What would you say to them?
I'd say, well, someone told me this once. I think it's a Walt Disney strategy for creative strategy. Have you heard this? So it's like there's 3 types of people you need. You need the dreamer, you need the realist, and the critic. And you can be all of them, or you can draw on all of them. But you can't have them all at the same time, or you won't get started. So you start with the vision, then you start with the realist, say, what's the plan? And then the critic asks, well, where's the weakness? Who's done it before? And so on. So I think that's been an easy tool that I've used either engaging with others in innovation or thinking about starting off the app and things.
That's great. I will carry that with me for sure. So yes, we've heard about your organization that you started, clearly an entrepreneurial mind, a app developer, but also the work that you're doing to help shift and shape policy at the UN level in your current role as well. But have you always been inventive? Was this something that was innate for you, or do you think innovation can be taught? Or do you think it's only innate, or can it be taught as well?
I don't know. What do you think? Yes, yeah, a bit of both, like everything. But yeah, I think everyone is innovative. Actually, I see my kids. My mom always said, I'd always ask tough questions growing up in Ireland, and I'd got reprimanded for it on occasion, challenging the patriarchy. Yes, but also what I noticed, particularly with having young kids going through education, is we often unlearn it. We unlearn people, is that a word? To how to be innovative. We set up social norms, gender norms, formalities. My daughter went to a great early education school. We were living in Jersey City in the US, and it was just such a creative place. It was all about curiosity, and it was all about collaboration, and it was just a phenomenal way to look at how we can address young people, and I think we unlearn people too much.
So we have to relearn and allow our brains to reshape. Yes, exactly, yes. It's quite good coming from a feminist from Ireland. It's good. And in your experience, what impact have you seen in being innovative in your life? You started to talk a bit about the impact, but has it created a ripple effect? Does it start to inspire people around you, or are people doubting you? Or how would you navigate those doubts if they do exist?
Yeah, I think so. Part of it also is working in a movement, like a social movement, a women's organization. Part of what I've seen is you need to sometimes get out of the way of innovation. Sometimes you need to say yes, sometimes you need to encourage others and accept things. So this is key, I think, this kind of solidarity. People sometimes use the word solidarity, but it goes with this impact that we are in this together, particularly those working for peace and humanity. There's more people that want peace in the world than are committed to investing in violence and perpetrating violence. So we need to respect that and give people space.
And I have a few questions here that we were gathered earlier. This is from Twitter. So, truth or myth? Innovation requires money.
I'd say myth.
Myth. Okay.
Yeah, I think you can do a lot. Actually,
kind
of the message, I think, for me is innovation really is by changing thinking. So yes, money can help, because also you need to invest, but it really depends on what you're doing. And innovation for me is very much about how we think about global security, how we approach peace and security in our world.
Now the next question from somebody. I see a problem and I have a solution. How do I get moving? Very simple. How do we get moving?
I think that's a good question, because I think everybody has that feeling. So, yeah, you probably feel like hesitant. And I go back to that short example I shared of look for inspiration and look for people around you that you can build something with if you're in that place.
And this one goes to your experience more with Wilf here. So what is it like to break barriers to traditional approaches to global security, clearly taking a non-traditional, a feminist approach to the work that you're doing? How is that to break those barriers?
These are interesting questions. Thank you.
Very diverse. We got a
Twitter
dynamic
world. Yeah, no, it's very energizing, I think, because of the people we get to work with. I think it's like all of you here in the room, we get to work with, I'm privileged to work with women who really do risk their lives to bring solutions to their communities. They organize locally, and I have huge amount of respect to do that. As working here in Geneva, our role is often about amplifying, about bringing the message from the local level to the global level, and vice versa, how we use the human rights system to advance the work on security, how we address militarism in our world and change thinking around what is security. Around how we invest in security, how we shift the norms within the institutions. It's something coming from a long legacy of an organisation like WILF. It's really critical that we also keep asking those questions, that we look at the transformation. Some people think about women, peace and security as equaling adding women to the system of peace and security, adding more women to the military or the other institutions, and it's very much not that. What WILF women, what women that organised to bring 1325 to the Security Council and other work was about addressing the root causes of war. As one woman says, it's not about making war safer for women, it's about ending war. And I think this is really the critical question for today in the world. How can we address the new wars? How can we look at how we finance conflict, what we prioritize, who's profiting from the wars we're in today?
Thank you. And you also have you've written a chapter in a book that's coming out, the Oxford Handbook on Women, Peace and Security. What is that about, that bit? Or should we wait till it is available and then we all have to go and buy it and read it, which is going to be great. It's going to be very interesting, I'm sure.
It's a giant book that compiles,
the Oxford Handbook.
It compiles many perspectives on the intersections with women, peace and security and global policy. We wrote a chapter, my colleague Ray and I, on the journey, the campaigning journey to get the gender-based violence as a legally binding provision in the Arms Trade Treaty. And we worked together as a small group of people I remember exactly where we were when we said, will we do this, won't we do this? With three of us sitting around a table in a coffee shop close to UN headquarters in New York. And we mobilized, people mobilized, over 100 countries in the end made it a red line, a non-negotiable for them. And there was moments in the campaign where countries, delegations to the ATT needed to change their opinion. And it took, I remember one short anecdote, do I have time?
1 minute.
And it will show the integration of the system. A representative from CEDAW committee walked across from the conference room in UN headquarters to where the ATT was happening and whispered into her delegation ear. And after that, the flag went up and they took the floor and said, the inclusion of a gender-based violence as a legally binding provision is a priority for our country. And before that, we as activists had spent ages trying to get this country to come. And the turning point was they turned many other countries in their regional group. And so the numbers moved. And I think what it taught me was also these moments of momentum, particularly in campaigns, are really critical to how we change things, this tipping point and keeping things going. This is what the chapter is about in the book. We also share this anecdote, and I wrote it with Ray Atchison, who is an amazing leader. She was also part of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons on the steering committee, a great woman-led campaign that brought about the treaty to ban nuclear weapons.
So you've bounced all over a lot of different topics, and I mean, it's clear that you have an inventive mind as well, a very creative mind. So my closing question to you, just very quickly, is if you were to encourage us all as we leave tonight, where do we start? What is the next point for innovation in global security? How do we set that creative spark, that fire within us to go and seek change, to make a shift in global security?
That's a great question, I think, and there's many in this room in influential positions in space, and I think I'll just leave it with kind of where we started, or where Nicholas also ended, is the process of inclusivity, of who's involved, who's respected, and this really goes to, for us, to changing our thinking, but in addition to also changing what we do and how we act and what we accept as normal. To be around the table. And if we can go out of this room to think a little bit differently, bring some feminist curiosity, or provoke other types of curiosity in the work we're doing, I think it will be really helpful to bring about inclusivity in the world of global security.
Thank you, Maria. So inclusivity and a shift of mindset as we leave here this evening. Thank you so much for your time and for your openness, and all the best. So I would now like to welcome back Director of the GCSP, Ambassador Christian Dissay, who will now introduce the jury members who helped to choose and select this year's winning project for the 10,000 Swiss franc prize for innovation in global security. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ashley. Thank you very much for both of you for being here in front. I am a gender champion, like many of you here, so I make sure that we have also a gender balance after that. And what we have seen in working at GCSP is that gender, inclusiveness, diversity are forces multiplier. And we, André, the former head of the Swiss Armed Forces, we know what force multiplier means in the military, and this is really force multipliers in fostering us into be more imaginative, creative, and goes together for better solutions. So now it's my privilege to introduce the jury who have worked a lot going through the project. So I will invite to join me on the stage His Excellency Michael Muller, the Director General of the United Nations Office in Geneva. Thank you, Michael. Also, Lieutenant General André Blattmann, the former head of the Swiss Armed Forces. Mrs. Angela Kane, who is the Senior Fellow at the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, and the former United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. And also, not here with us tonight, is Professor Jane Royston, who is a serial entrepreneur and member of the Swiss Science Council, and also Professor Naïef Al-Rodan, who is the originator of the prize, who is the head of the GCSP's Geopolitics and Global Future Program, and also an honorary fellow at St. Helena College at University of Oxford. So we have evaluated 156 projects. 50 were from Africa, 26 from Asia, 12 from Europe, 20 from Central and Latin America, and 5 from North America. On the topic that were covered, we have gender, 6 projects, education, 23, peace and conflict, 42, human rights, 14, climate change, 17, radicalization, 4, digital security, 17, theory building, 6, demining, 1, and others, so a broad range of different topics, 26. So it was a lot of work because we had a lot of criteria, and thank you so much, all of you, for having been part of the jury. And now I have the pleasure of opening the envelope with the winner, and I will do that now. And so the winner of the 2018 GCC Prize for Innovation in Global Security goes to BMJ's Clinical Decision Support Training Initiative. Wow. So before I invite the representative to join us on the podium, let me just say a few words about this project. It's a new and re-emerging infectious diseases are a major threat to global security. To improve the management of dangerous pathogens and infectious diseases, BMJ has implemented the Clinical decision support training initiative in 6 countries. The initiative has already trained more than 12,000 infectious disease specialists and doctors across 900 institutions across the Middle East, Central and East Asia regions. And so I'm very honored and pleased to welcome Ms. Mitali Wroczynski, the head of strategic partnership at BMJ's. Also Dr. Elisa Roma, who is the head of partnership and program manager. And also Amy Hilton, the head of institutional marketing. Please join us. And so we can
Congratulations. Thank you, jury members. Thank you, Ambassador Ducey. So I would like to invite the winning team back up here now to join me on stage. All right, welcome, ladies. Congratulations. And what a whirlwind. So Ms. Mitali here with me, also Dr. Elisa Roma, and Ms. Amy Hilton. So thank you for joining me here on stage tonight. Amy, I want to start with you. What is the story behind BMJ's Clinical Decision Support Training Initiative?
Well, firstly, let me say thank you very much for having us. And I think when we say BMJ, I think I just would like to introduce it as what we were formerly known, which was the British Medical Journal, which started in 1840, and we've gone through many variations and lots of innovations since then. And in itself, the initiative started how we consider ourselves kind of quite at the forefront of evidence-based medicine and kind of a go-to for doctors. And this really has allowed us to become a trusted resource for doctors. They like to work with us, and in turn that created a bridge for us. It allowed us to work very closely with funders, policymakers, and the frontline healthcare clinicians in the regions themselves. And we were approached to develop the programme to really tackle one challenge in itself, which is one I think many of you in the room will know very well, which is the concerns around infectious diseases and the threat that they pose on global health and global health security, and the importance that we place on having resilient healthcare systems, a workforce that is very well trained in the ability to detect, diagnose and manage those infectious diseases, because without that, that's when an outbreak can potentially happen and become a true concern. So what the initiative is it allows and provides doctors, it equips them with access to 2 resources, which is BMJ Best Practice, which is an online clinical decision support tool, and BMJ Learning, which is learning modules, all focused around infectious diseases. And at the forefront, it allows these doctors to go through and see relevant content and information to be able to diagnose and detect the infectious diseases in the countries.
Ms. Vitali, can I ask you, why did you decide to enter the GCSP Prize for Innovation and Global Security?
Well, this wasn't planned, but I would say, actually, you could argue the journey started here. So, as Amy said, we were approached about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, to think about designing this programme. And at the time, BMJ is very much the new kid on the block in this area. We've only been aware of sort of global health security and only been looking at the connections between health and security for the last few years. So we were approached and we were a little bit puzzled, and we just thought, well, what can we do in this space? And I sort of thought, actually, this sounds really interesting, but I know very little about it. So I did a bit of Google research, and up came the GCSP and the Global Health Security course. So I came.
And what year was that?
I think that was 3 years ago.
3 years ago, you
yeah. So So, and since then, obviously, I've been to other things as well. But so it very much started here, actually, and that sort of really helped us to go back and design the initiative and roll it out in a way that sort of made sense in terms of the broader context as well. And then, obviously, being aware of the GCSP and you know, a lot of blood, sweat and tears went into this. There are about 50, 60 people within BMJ that have been involved in just making this happen, as well as staff in the countries themselves too. And so we just wanted a way to, you know, validate what we've been doing. I think the fact that GCSP recognise us will now really help us to extend the programme even further, and also just to kind of showcase the amazing results that we've achieved, really. So, yeah.
You have achieved some quite amazing results, which were shared earlier. And Dr. Roma, I would like to come to you. If you could share just one example of a particular infectious disease on which the CDS training initiative has had a significant impact. I'm sure we're all here very curious to find out what infectious diseases people are working on, but more broadly. But if you have one example from your initiative.
Yes, so thank you.
Yeah.
So we have been working through a variety of diseases, and we have quite robust evidence on how they have actually impacted the ability of doctors to diagnose new diseases, to look at differential diagnosis, select treatment. And if I think of one example, one of the recent one that came from one of our case studies made with the doctor, it was about this chest physician from Azerbaijan that was able to basically view and visit a patient that was misdiagnosed and identify and diagnose him with tuberculosis. So, the doctor said we did that just by consulting the app and just looking up at symptoms. We were able to actually identify the right diagnosis. So that for us is a huge success, really, because we make a clear impact in the doctor ability to change their practice.
But it's just to add, it's everything from anthrax to brucellosis to, as Elisa said, tuberculosis. It covers, I think, 48 especially dangerous pathogens that are listed by the US as disease pathogens of concern. So it's covering those, but it's also then covering a broader range of infectious diseases. But one thing we were very clear about from the outset is actually this isn't just about infectious diseases. Mm-hmm. It's also about non-communicable diseases, because we feel that it's important to build resilient healthcare systems where the workforce are capable of dealing with anything, because we know that when an outbreak arises, it's not just about dealing with the outbreak, it's also about maintaining the healthcare system of the country whilst that outbreak is an occurrence. So, and we also know, going back to the point of sustainability, that a Ministry of Health, what incentive do they have to continue with a programme of training if it's just focused on niche dangerous pathogens that many doctors may not see in their career? So what we need to do is make sure that we're meeting the priorities of the Ministry of Health as well, so that they have an incentive to sustain. But also what we're doing is we're not necessarily just training doctors on the specific infectious disease, we're training them on how to use the tool, so that when an infectious disease or there's a suspicion, there's an index of suspicion that something might not be quite right, they know exactly where to go and how to find the answer.
Okay, and you mentioned a vast number of different types of pathogens, but I want to focus on these ministries of health that you're working with. So you have started in 6 countries globally. Why those 6, and what's happening in those 6, in short?
Good question, and it's a decision we're not always in control of, because I think as anyone who's worked on any global health funded programme or global health security funded programme, it's a combination of the funders' priorities, our priorities, and the country priorities. And so I think there were lots of factors in the reason why the countries were picked, partly geopolitical, partly because those were the ministries of health that were most interested and most likely to adopt and most likely to sustain. And also language played a part. So some countries were picked because the doctors were able to speak English. Other countries were picked because we had some translated content, but actually we've done a huge amount of translation as part of the programme to make it accessible to as many people as possible. So there are a whole variety of reasons, but one of the critical ones going forward that we want to make sure is at the forefront is ability to sustain and appetite to sustain.
And so the countries that you're currently working in, where do you hope to expand after that, Dr. Roma?
Yes, so after this sixth country, in January we're going to launch to Kazakhstan. And this is partly because of the demand from the country, from their political leadership, but also because, as Mitali mentioned, we have worked with making these resources accessible. So we have translated majority of the content in Russian language, and so we want to make efficiencies to be able to move to all the countries that speak Russian or are trained in Russia to move. So that's the next country. But Mitali also said we're working on sustaining the existing initiative as well, continuing.
Are they interested in maintaining those relationships? Yes, that's a good answer.
Yes, they are. I mean, financing is always a challenge, but I think at a grassroots level, the doctors are just crying out for these resources. You know, we've spoken to doctors who have come to us and said, "We're so grateful you're here because we're still using 20-year-old textbooks to learn medicine." So
that's a bit scary. If I may say for myself. So I would go to Miss Hilton now, sorry. But that is clearly one difficulty, as you've just mentioned. But what other difficulties have you encountered in the dissemination and the implementation of your program?
So Mitali's already mentioned the kind of political element. I think another kind of challenge we've actually had is the adoption of a program. I think you can't just kind of assume with one announcement or one communication of a program that doctors will just go ahead and find the available resources, regularly use the resources that are available for them. So we've worked very hard with the country partners, and people obviously work with us in the country as well, to establish kind of ongoing engagement programs. So regularly communicating with the doctors, sending them reminders, asking for regular feedback as well, which I think has been really key. And I'd also highlight that one approach doesn't fit all, which I'm sure many people in this room know. What works in one country hasn't necessarily worked in others, so we've had to be quite flexible and adapt our kind of communication approach as we've gone along.
Right. So. And Dr. Roma, I want to see a bit more broadly now to the industry of global health in itself, but a wider lens looking at what are the biggest issues facing global health experts today. You mentioned a few on your own program, but from yourself.
Yeah, so, well, I guess I could just say a lot of things like antimicrobial resistance, the cancer pandemic, infectious disease outbreaks, equality in university healthcare, and that would be it. But I don't think it's just that. And I think, as tonight, as come up from tonight's discussion, global health experts are working in a very changing geopolitical environment. And so we've seen recently how wars and international relations make us unable to control the spread of infectious diseases. We see how populist governments are actually affecting how the climate of our environment goes. And then we see how political superpowers are shaping the global health security agenda. So I think global health experts need to be health experts, but not just health experts. They need to be really political and financially astute to understand what's going on in the world, and as well as working with other experts. And in a sense, our initiative is a bit of this, because we're not just medical doctors. We have technologists, we have political scientists, so it's just a combination of expertise. And I think that's what global health experts need to work up to, I think.
Interesting. And Mitali, over to you. What is the importance of health in global peace and security? And why has it been left behind for so long?
I don't profess to be an expert in this area by any means, but I guess from BMJ's perspective, health is often, one of the casualties of conflict, and conflict has a huge impact on populations and on countries, both in the countries where it's happening, on the healthcare infrastructure, and on the healthcare workers, but also, through migrant populations to the countries, to the host nations that people are fleeing to, and puts huge strain and pressure on healthcare systems. And obviously our interest is to try and support those healthcare systems as best we can. As BMJ, I guess, on the humanitarian side, it's very difficult for us to make a contribution and to do anything because we've always been involved in the kind of more prevention, preparedness side of things, and in supporting doctors during stable environments where they've got access to journals or they've got access to medical resources. But increasingly, we can't do that. So it's quite challenging for us because we're trying to figure out, how do we support migrant populations? How do we support countries like Iraq, which is one of the countries on our initiative, for example, where we were providing BMJ learning to the whole country several years ago, and that all just stopped overnight because of the conflict. And now we're sort of re-engaging, and the doctors are beginning to come together and have an appetite for doing something. So I think it's a really challenging question, both on kind of how it impacts health of people and also how it impacts on our ability to support those countries.
So I have a broad question here as well, but why do you focus on education rather than relief? And either of you can answer as well, but...
Well, I guess Mitalia just partly answered this question, but so I think this is what we are expert in, but I think the two things can go hand in hand. We can prepare countries so that the relief workers can sort of do their work as well. But why education? And if you think about infectious diseases and doctors, I think there are about 150,000 randomized controlled trials that are published every year. And a doctor simply cannot keep up and at the same time practice. And so, but medicine is a fast-changing discipline. And so we want, through educate doctors, to be able to help making healthier environment and healthier world. So I think that is what our contribution really.
Yeah, and during the Ebola outbreak, I guess where we can add value is when the Ebola outbreak happened, obviously, initially there was very little evidence of effective sort of treatments and approaches. So we had to mobilise very quickly with international partners to gather together the evidence that there was and the evidence as it evolved to try and quickly put together resources and make those available to the doctors in the countries affected. So that's where we've been able to contribute on the sort of response and humanitarian side, which is obviously a very, very small part of what we can do. So I think that's where we can really sort of bring something to the table.
Yeah. And I want to ask, what would you advise, I'll go to Amy, what would you advise for applicants for next year's GCSP Prize for Innovation and Global Security applicants? Because there may be a few people in the room who are curious to apply, or tuning in online, of course.
I would definitely say if you're working on a programme and it's making a difference, which I think many people probably are, just simply go for it. I think this is possibly, this is very rewarding for us, but also this is very educational for us. We've learned a lot through going through this process as well, and through reconvening our ideas, reassessing what we did, the application itself, that helped bring a lot of our ideas back to the forefront and gave us the chance to kind of critique in some stages what we did do as well. So, yeah, I would very much encourage it.
So go for it, but revise and edit, and then go for it again. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time, and we really look forward to seeing the impact that you guys have in the work that you're doing, and for following your story and your journey. Congratulations again, and everyone join me in a round of applause for this year's winners.